know a little bit about your background, and you've got kind of an interesting one. So I'd love if you could kind of share more about your history and how you got into childcare and marketing specifically.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question. My original background is actually a sporting background. So I was a professional basketball player. So I played college basketball in the United States, in Texas, and then played professionally in Sydney, in Australia for a couple of years. So yeah, just sort of happened naturally, I think. It just sort of fell into my lap. Playing in Sydney, it was a great place, big city, lots of opportunity, quite a few sponsors. Happened to own childcare centres, and just sort of naturally evolved. After my sporting career, you're looking to find that next step of what you're going to do. And fortunately, I went to college, I got my master's degree. I had that sort of business background, so I know I wanted to get into business, but what industry? I was unsure, and sort of just met the right people that had that background in childcare, and opportunities came up. And um, yeah, ever since then, it's just been 100% all in on childcare. And I've never looked back. I've got a 3-year-old of my own now, and so I know the importance of childcare and making sure they have the right start before the age of 5, and all the importance of that. I also have an appreciation for the industry, especially educators and childcare's. Yes, they're underpaid, but all the work that they do, it really goes unrecognized. So the more I spend time in the industry, the more I have a love for it and appreciation of it. A lot of people work in this industry not for money; they do it for a passion, and I think it's much the same for us.
Yeah. Well, and one thing that's kind of interesting, I think, about your background is you didn't go immediately into childcare marketing agency, but you worked in-house for a childcare operator. Is that right?
Yeah, like I said, it just sort of all happened naturally. Like the first step was working for the YMCA actually. There was a combination of before and after school care, as well as they had gyms as well. And, it was just a good introduction. And then I had an opportunity to go over and work for a company called Mind Champs. That was a Singapore-based company who was moving to Australia. It was a really good opportunity. And then worked with a big group in Australia called Little Zax, and then also help them launch a childcare tech platform. It's kind of like the Uber of childcare in Australia, connecting educators and centres. So if you need casual staff, just like Uber, you'll put in your request. It'll ping everybody in a 20-kilometre radius or 15-mile radius for your audience. And yeah, it automatically fills shifts. And so we were able to work with that for the first 3 years and get it to 30 million in revenue really quickly. So I had a lot of success working in childcare marketing as a marketing manager, as a CMO, and then working in childcare tech. So really diverse background. And then I actually moved recently from Sydney to Austin, Texas, and with that change came a lot of opportunity. Actually, a lot of clients I was sort of consulting for on the side and working with, and it was like, okay, well, the clients aren't the issue. It's I'm using so many other external agencies to get the work done, and it just made a lot of sense to just start my own. And so uh, again, it's all happened naturally and made total sense. Yeah, now we run Helppli. We're a full service agency that works not just on marketing, but we also have an enrollments team in the childcare space. We also have a development team. We build websites. So we've got a pretty big team now, and we're growing across Australia and the United States.
That's great. Well, I know you're familiar with this, but we recently released the 2025 EC benchmark report, both a version in the US and in Australia. A big trend that we've been seeing among several large trends is that growth and expansion, specifically expanding into new locations, new centers, are top priorities for a lot of operators this year. Have you seen that with your clients so far?
Yeah, I mean, ever since COVID, there's been rapid expansion. I think more so during, 2019 to sort of 21. A lot of stimulus and whatnot, and a lot of people rushed into opening childcare centres, and it's created a bit of oversaturation, to be honest. A lot of centres have sort of had a bit of hard time recently. I kind of feel like we're in a peak and trough scenario. We're in the trough at the moment, so I know a lot of operators are struggling. but I know a lot of operators are looking to expand. And so I think it's changed a lot from let's just take whatever center is sort of available to let's be really strategic. Let's make sure we open the right center, because having children to fill the center is the most important thing. So I actually work with quite a few centers to help them select sites as well. The game for them has really changed. It's not about just finding sites. They'll turn down a lot more in order to find the right one. And so I think everyone wants to expand, not necessarily quickly, but more making sure that they make the right moves.
Yeah. I love that you talk about strategically trying to find the right location, because I think that it can be something maybe that's overlooked when people are just kind of looking to grow at all costs. Maybe they aren't necessarily doing all that due diligence behind the scenes to really make sure it's going to be a success. So how do you recommend your clients choose that right location? Like what are the qualities they should be looking for in a given area to determine if it's the right spot for them?
Yeah, I mean, fortunately in the childcare industry, we still have a lot of mum and pup. I think in Australia it's like almost 50% have less than 20 sites. That's good for the industry. It's good that you can also have someone who's been somewhat successful be able to open up their own center. But also a lot of people will rush into making decisions because it is so hard to find a good site. And a lot of people will start from the premise of, oh, it doesn't matter where I open it, it'll fill, right? Like there's children everywhere. But that's just not the case. And we see so many operators get stuck in finding a site first and then thinking that it should just automatically fill. And they come to us for marketing support, and we go in and have a look at the numbers and say, you have this many available approved locations for childcare, and you have this many children. Most children don't tend 5 days a week. So you actually don't have enough supply for your demand. And once we actually crunch the numbers and take it through, sometimes it's like the best case scenario is 60, 70, 80%. And that's if things go well. And so it's a real big dose of reality for a lot of operators when you tell them that, because everyone assumes you can just fill. But if you're full, then your competitors around you are very empty. So it just creates an ultra competitive environment. So we do like it when we have people looking for sites with us before they even purchase a center. That way we can help guide them. The things that we're looking for is making sure we find a good ratio. We call it the child ratio between the number of children and the available childcare places in that catchment. And so the ratio that we're looking for is anything between 2.4 and above. Pretty much anything above 2.4 we can fill to 100%. The higher the better, obviously. Like if you have a center that's in the threes, like you can open your center and fill within the first 4 to 6 months. So that's why site selection is so important, because if you truly want to fill your center and be successful, you have to get that right. And then obviously the normal site selection things come into it, such as future growth in the area, location specific, accessibility. You're on a major highway, or is there a major highway separating you? And there's literally been a scenario we've had a center on a really busy road, and we've taken all of their children's home addresses and we've created a heat map, and 95% of the children were on one side of the highway and only a handful of the others, because just to cross that highway would take 10-15 minutes. And so for a lot of families, convenience is everything. They need to be able to drop their kid off in 5 to 10 minutes. I'm a parent myself, and I know that's the truth. If you have to travel that little bit further, you might be looking for care closer to you. Yeah, site selection is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned, the ratio to look for. Can you break that down a little bit more in terms of, so how many children, I guess, in a given area should there be in comparison to providers?
Yeah, so it differentiates a bit between the US and Australia, but I use Australia as an example because they have the government CCS, and it really opens up your eyes to what those numbers look like. So, for example, if you have, say, 200 children and 100 places in the area, and you're trying to fill that center, first of all, it sounds great. You've got 200 children and 100 places. Shouldn't it just fill? Well, we know that most children only attend between 2.5 to 2.8 days per week. That depends on the socioeconomic status. Lower income areas actually attend care more than higher income areas. So based on, the earnings, we can kind of predict those children are only going to attend 2.5 days a week. So you actually do need 200 children to fill those 100 places. In addition to that, not 100% of children attend care. And so in Australia, CCS data that actually shows you how many children in the total population are attending care, and it's around 64% that are actually taking or pulling from government subsidy. So again, you've got 200, you've divided that by 2 to fill in 100 places, but then you've only got 60% of those children actually attending care. So really, that centre won't fill up to 100%. It's only going to fill up to 64, 65. Maybe slightly higher if you pull in children from just outside the catchment, and then maybe slightly higher again if you're better than your competition.
Yeah. I love
So yeah. So it's just important to really understand the numbers before selecting a site, because I've seen it too many times. People get into a lot of trouble.
Yeah, I love that approach. I think that that's definitely kind of a more methodical way to go about it. And I know we definitely have some customers at LineLeader who are probably thinking about it in that way, but I feel like there's a lot that probably aren't. So I think that that's a really great approach. As I'm sure you're aware, as a parent of a young child yourself, it's becoming increasingly important to young parents to kind of shop local and like kind of be a part of their own community. So, for maybe a larger childcare organization that has locations across a state or across multiple states, how do you kind of make sure that their marketing feels really curated and personal to the specific community their center is in?
Yeah, I mean, it's just so important, right? Like as a childcare, you are an integral part of the community. Families attending your care every single day, putting trust in you. There's just no other option but to be and embed yourself in that local community. And I think a lot of centres really do that well, and just educators in general do that well. They get the local fire brigade in, they partner with local businesses, and on the flip side, a lot of local businesses or community groups want to work with childcare centres. So it's actually a really easy thing to do. But if you can get in that corporate trap and just think, someone else is going to do it, that's not always the best approach. And working with Zach's was, 40, 50 centres, we always made sure that we had that local area marketing presence, especially from the beginning when you're opening new centres, making sure you're partnering with local groups, sporting clubs. The local cafe is a gold mine for young mums. Making those strategic partnerships from the get-go and strengthening them, especially if you're doing well. Like if your centre's full, like that's when you should really be doubling down, sponsoring, and just embedding yourself in that local community, because the more you give, the more you'll get.
Absolutely. Yeah, a mistake that we often see centers make is that they're full, so they assume they can take their focus off of marketing, but we find that that's when you should double down and reinvest those resources so that you can grow that wait list and maintain that full occupancy.
Easily fall into the full trap and just take it easy, but it only takes one mega center to open up next door, and it's the new shiny thing. And people will flock to it. I've seen it many, many times. The new shiny center is a fresh start. They'll come in and undercut you on price because they know what your prices are in order to fill. And the only thing you have that will protect you is your trust within the community. So if you're in a privileged position to be there, many operators are not. So if you are, that's when you really should be, okay, well, let's find a way to strengthen the relationship with the community. Make sure that we have a great looking center, reinvest those earnings. And when things like that do happen, you will be rock solid.
Can you maybe share an example of kind of like a hyper local marketing campaign that you've done for a client that you feel like was really impactful for them?
Hyperlocal, I mean, obviously we will run your Google and your Facebook ads, but we'll also provide strategic support on what else our clients can do on a local level. One initiative that was really cool recently was a partnership with a local coffee shop, and every Monday morning between 10 and 11:30, the childcare centre would sponsor free coffee for mum and bub, and so that was really good because it built a really strong relationship with the local coffee shop, which was already a really trusted part of the community. Everyone that lives locally goes there. Strengthen that relationship with the coffee shop, who obviously referred business to us throughout that relationship. But then, because it's doing something for goodwill, parents automatically know that you're there because a part of that deal was come and have a coffee, bring a bub, enjoy, and here's just a business card saying who's paying for it, and they get to know, okay, wow, childcare centre's doing this for me. They'll take note that you're there. When it comes time for them to enroll or look for care, I think you might be front of mind. We've seen that work quite well. And the good thing about that is once you've done something like that and not expected anything in return, you're able to post on mothers groups and community groups and actually post your branding and get your name out there. They won't take it down because you're giving something of value to the community. It's a great way for for-profits to embed themselves. And I've even seen centres do that, and in addition, they'll run a Baby and Me program at the centre, not for enrolled families, but for families that are with newborns. They're currently on mat leave, and they're looking for mothers groups, or they're looking for activities to do with their child, especially early on as a mum. You're very lonely, so it's good to get out and network. And those mothers groups or those Baby and Me groups have been truly successful. It's going down to grassroots, right? So you're getting local families that have just had a child who will eventually need care come and interact with your centre, your educators, and your families. By the time they're ready to enroll, you are the default option. They're used to going there, they trust you, the child's comfortable in the centre, comfortable with the educators. So yeah, I mean, that's sort of an example of a hyper-local grassroots campaign, and I've seen that work very well.
I really like that. There's, a lot of marketing nowadays really has to be tied back to results and the return on investment, and it's very focused on, lead generation or generating new contacts. And so I think making sure that educators aren't losing sight of the importance of building their brand as well, and the investment that can require, but also the goodwill that it can definitely generate for them, like you mentioned. I think that's a really great recommendation, and I feel like it's a good area for childcare centers to focus on more.
Yeah, and I think that's a misconception when it comes to marketing is everyone assumes marketing is 100% lead generation, but really there's two forms of marketing. One is to generate the leads. The other one is purely to establish a brand. You'll see massive companies, luxury brands, they're not doing any lead generation. They're doing purely brand because if they're wanted, if people know them, then naturally they're going to go and buy them, right? It's the same for any local business. Yes, you need your lead generations and to find care, which is kind of the pull, but also you need a really good brand presence and for people to know that you're there. So it is good to have a mix. I would say like brand can be 10-15%, but it's still a very important part, and then the rest can go into sort of lead generation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and another big theme in the benchmark report was all around scaling, and how do you kind of take what's working at one location, repackage it, use it in another location that maybe you're newly opening or just trying to kind of reach that full occupancy threshold. What, from your perspective, are kind of some best practices on building a scalable marketing and enrollment strategy that someone could use at multiple locations?
Yeah, I think that's the fortunate thing with childcare. It is quite scalable. What works in one market almost always works in the other market. You don't need to reinvent the wheel as you go into new locations. Yes, you've got to adapt to the local community, but for the most part, you can create templates, processes, and systems, and you can reuse and repurpose those for new centres. So LineLeader being a very useful tool to help with that. You can set up drip sequences, nurture campaigns for one centre, duplicate that over to the next centre, and then just localize. That's a very easy way to scale. Same with the business rules and having everything sort of tailored to that new centre. You can set up templates for campaigns. You can rerun marketing initiatives, like if you're running sort of an open house event at one centre, well, you've got everything that you need. You can pretty much duplicate that over to the next event. So childcare is good from that point of view. I mean, we literally with Little Zach's, we scaled from 15 to 40 centres in a very short period, opening one new centre per month. So, that is a heavy lift, but because the process and systems are all there from not just marketing, but from the whole operational side on how to open up a centre, how to purchase the furniture, the resources, who's going to unpack it, who's going to put it together, making sure the electricity is done, the list goes on and on. But it's all the same, it's all predictable, and once you have that plan, you can then scale quite comfortably.
I think documentation is something that any business, especially when they're in the growth stage, really needs to prioritize. I think it's something that's often kind of overlooked, defining what are the steps and like what is my standard operating procedure of things that I need to check off and get in line before I can grow to that next stage. So I think that's a good call out in terms of kind of like having a list that you can then take and duplicate at new locations.
I mean, we have some clients come on that have like 4 or 5 centers, and they're not using LineLeader. They're using, leads coming into their emails or spreadsheets to capture leads from Facebook, or not even doing that. And I'm like, the first thing I say is, how did you do that? How did you scale to 4 or 5 centers without having the proper tools in place? It's scary. And sure enough, they've scaled, but they're not full. They're not efficient. They're wasting leads. This is why it's so important to have tools like LineLeader or other tools to support, to make sure that like you're not losing any of those leads. They're very expensive. Google can be up to $100 a lead, Facebook up to $50 a lead, and you need to convert those. So you lose one lead that goes missing, or just not responded to in a timely manner. That's $100 out the door. And so if you're spending on marketing, it's super efficient to have the right tools and systems in place to make sure that you're not having any drop off whatsoever. All of those leads are coming into one central location, one bucket, and are being managed appropriately. Contacting leads within the first hour. The sooner you contact the lead, the higher your conversion rate is going to be. If you've got multiple centers, outsource your enrollments. Use somebody like Helppli, or get somebody in your own team to centralize it, because their one job is just going to be, a lead comes in, they're going to contact them straight away. That's all going to help with conversions. Unfortunately, your center director is wearing a lot of hats. They're making sure their children don't kill themselves, the educators aren't in fights, and just managing the center from a day-to-day point of view. They're also the social media manager. They're also doing all the compliance. It is impossible to expect them to also contact leads in a timely manner. It's just not going to happen, and you're going to have wastage. I understand small operators, 1 to 2 services, they just don't have a choice. Well, they do. They can use someone like Helppli. It is a little bit more expensive than obviously going it alone, but almost always you'll get that return on investment because you're going to convert at a higher rate. You're not going to lose leads. And so, yeah, I would say that if you are serious about scaling, you have to have a tool like LineLeader to capture the leads, to nurture them, to convert them, and you have to take enrollments very serious.
There's a saying about, how much money are you leaving on the table, or how much revenue are you leaving on the table? And I think that's something that more and more providers are starting to realize, how much revenue they actually could be missing out on, because either a lead isn't being followed up with at all because it was written down on a sticky note, or they're followed up with, but they're followed up with like a week later, and the parents already moved on to another center, scheduled a tour, maybe even done a tour with another center at that point. So, 15 years ago when LineLeader, or Childcare Serum at the time, was founded, we actually worked with some of our very first clients in both the US and Australia to kind of build out that centralized enrollment team model. And it's become increasingly popular, I think, in recent years for that reason, because directors aren't natural born salespeople. They really are educators, and they're passionate about, working with the existing families already in their location, not necessarily marketing and selling to new ones. So yeah, I definitely believe in the importance of having even if it's just one enrollment specialist. We've had clients that have 10 locations, they have one enrollment specialist, and that person actually did all the lead follow-up, tour booking, and then they actually conducted all the tours on site. They actually drove to the locations and did the tours themselves. And just having that kind of like dedicated rep really makes an impact. Can you share a little bit about kind of how you've seen centralized enrollment teams play a part in your clients' growth, and how they maybe even got started with that model after, transitioning from kind of a decentralized enrollment model to a centralized one?
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly important. And I mean, for a lot of our clients that are looking to sort of go to a centralized model, it is probably the easiest sell I have to make, because we just go through the numbers. We work backwards. The first thing we're looking at is lost opportunity. Your centers are sitting at 80, 70%. Your profit is mostly in that last 10%. Once you take into consideration the empty spaces, it's like an aeroplane. Why would you want to fly an aeroplane empty? That's why they overbook them. It's the same for childcare. You want to find that last 15, 10%. That's where most of the profit sits. And so as soon as you do the numbers and like, okay, what is that worth? as a lost opportunity, it's in the hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions, depending on the size of the center and the number of centers. I worked with one client, I won't say who it is, but they had 15 locations, and we did the lost opportunity, and there was over $4 million that was just sitting on the sidelines. And it quite instantly becomes, okay, well, how much are you willing to invest to get some of that 4 million? And it's not a lot of money up front that you have to invest. Having that centralized enrollments team is instantly going to make sure you don't lose leads. It's going to improve your conversion rate from lead to tour complete. You can even try that yourself. You can keep it as is, and you can track it using LineLeader's conversion success. Then you can move to a centralized model and then measure it again. And I promise you'll have a massive increase. And then your lead tour complete to enrolled status, that's very important as well. And your centralized enrollments team is going to help with that. They're going to follow up. They're going to make sure the enrollment forms are complete, bonds are paid, booking orientations. And so, the value is in that centralized enrollments team. I always had my centralized enrollments team be the highest paid and be on heavy commission. Ultimately, if they're going to work a little bit harder, make an extra few phone calls, be a little bit more persuasive, that's good for childcare. And if you honestly believe that you have the best service to offer, by letting children go or families go to another service, you're doing them a disservice, right? They should be with you. If you truly believe that, then having a centralized enrollments team is so important, and persuading those families to come and enroll with you. Probably some key numbers that would be good to know. We look at many numbers, obviously, to evaluate, but it always comes down to 4 key numbers. The number of leads you can produce per center, the conversion percentage from lead to tour complete, the conversion percentage from tour complete to enrolled, and your churn rate. If your churn rate is low, it's going to be much easier to fill the bucket because you don't have a hole in it. If you can convert obviously more tours and more enrollments, you're going to grow. If your tours are converting and your enrollments are converting and you don't have a hole in your bucket, then it should just be a matter of generating more leads. So a lot of people will spend on marketing, generate more leads, but actually not improve their occupancy. Well, this is why it's important to have a tool like LineLeader to measure your conversions and also to know what your churn rate is in the center. Once you can get those numbers, it becomes a really simple game. Are families happy? Are they staying in the service? If they are, cool. Operationally, we're great. Are we getting enough tour conversions? If not, well, why not? We're not greeting families on arrival. Are we not, we're not acknowledging them throughout the center? Is it something to do with the tour? How can we improve? Is it the follow-up? Like look at all those things, and the benchmark that I tell most services is you need to be achieving 60% or above to have growth. Same from lead to tour. You need to be at 60% or above. Ultimately, I don't know. I don't have time to tour 3 centers as a parent. I might do 1 or 2. And so if we can't convert at 60% or above, that means that we're not the best service in the area. They're going elsewhere. So that's why we use 60%. If you can convert tour complete to enroll at 60% and lead to tour complete at 60%, and you're not losing families, we just want to be generating more leads. And then the final maybe bonus number we look at is staff happiness, because if your staff are happy, your families are happy, your children are happy. And if you have a happy service, if you're operationally good, marketing is just like throwing fuel on the fire. You're already going to be full if you don't do any marketing. If you're just operationally good and you have enough children in the local area, marketing is just going to fill you so much quicker.
When we talk about kind of like where you're going to reach profitability as a center, like what threshold do you need to be at? Our internal research that we've done over the years has always pointed to you need to be at least 75% occupancy in your center. And at 75%, you're really just kind of breaking even. You're not even making a profit at that point. So you really have to be in like the 80s, 90s to kind of realize any of the return on your investment. Unfortunately, last year we found in our benchmark report that 68% of centers were under 70% occupancy throughout 2024. So do you have kind of any advice? Obviously, mitigating churn, looking at where parents may be falling out and why they're leaving the center is super critical. But when we talk about if they've got a really great service, but they still can't reach that full occupancy, assuming they're in a good market as well, what are kind of initial marketing strategies or tactics that they should be deploying maybe to reach that 80-90% threshold?
Yeah, I mean, definitely important to recognize what you just mentioned, like, making sure that the service is operationally very good, and has a competitive offering, and making sure that there are enough children to fill. If those two things aren't right, then whatever you do from a marketing point of view is going to be a waste. Assuming those things are good, you probably are in a competitive environment if you're sitting around 65 to 70%. That's when you've got to sort of change strategy a little bit. You can't just do the always on, run Google ads, Facebook ads, a couple of social posts, and think the center's going to fill, because it's quite likely that your competitors are doing the same, if not more. And so when we're starting to get into those competitive environments, you've got everything happening in the bottom of the funnel. If you're going to compete in that space, you're not going to do that well, because you're going to be paying top dollar for leads. And if you're not converting at a very high clip, it's going to be very hard to fill. What you need to do is change the strategy and move up the funnel to the next rung, not to the top. Top would be like blog content, just things to get them to the website, like ebooks or something like that. More that middle of the funnel where, okay, they probably had the child, they're probably in need for care in the next 3 to 6 months, maybe sooner. They're not quite looking for care yet, but it's in the back of their mind. There is a very big market in there. Childcares aren't necessarily going after that. We want to change our strategy to find ways to bring those families into our service, give them an experience, and show them how good you are before they're ready to buy. If you can do that successfully, you're going to have a much better opportunity of converting those leads within that 3 to 6 month timeline versus your competitors. So programs like Baby and Me, I've seen like Stay and Play, where they'll come into the service. Again, it's a mother's group, but maybe it's for older children if you're having trouble filling up the older age group. It could be your open houses, it could be community events, it could be once a month on a Saturday you have a father-son event, or for example, like, I always go back to this. Every Saturday, the first of the month, I go to Home Depot with my son, and we build stuff together. It's very high in the funnel and grassroots for Home Depot, but you build incredible experiences and memories with your son at 3 years old, all the way up until they're like 10, 11, 12. I'm pretty sure we're going to be lifetimers to Home Depot, right? I think you can apply the same to childcare, and find ways to get families in your services for experiences that add value, build trust, and let them see how good you are. They also get used to traveling to your service. So by the time that they're ready for care, you are the default option. That's your question. In a competitive environment, don't think the bottom of the funnel, think the middle of the funnel. It's a slower conversion time, but if you're playing the long game, you're going to win more often, more into the future.
Yeah, I like that. I think too, like the funnel is shaped kind of like an inverted triangle for a reason, because the bottom of the funnel tends to be a much smaller pool of people. And so the higher you go up in the funnel, the more people you're going to reach. And when they are ready to make that purchasing decision, you'll be top of mind. You're probably familiar with the stat, I don't know if much of our audience is, that roughly only 5% of buyers at any given time are ready to make a purchasing decision. I always recommend that people really think about how they're catering to the other 95% of people that maybe in the past they've spent time, money, resources on the 5%, and then when the 95% is ready to buy, they're not, or you kind of chosen another location that thought about them and catered to them sooner.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I tell everyone, there's a lot of one things, isn't there, today?
Yeah.
But I always say is there is no silver bullet in childcare. The closest to it is maybe an open day, but you're only going to get a small dent in your occupancy. You just obviously have to be operationally good. That's a non-negotiable these days, and have solid Google reviews, etc. But if you're in a slightly competitive environment, it's going to be the work that you do up front. Running those events, in the upper funnel, then nurturing them. They may come and do the event, but they're not going to be in care for another 3 to 4 months. How do you stay in touch and continue to engage them? What sort of content do you feed? How can you utilize something like LineLeader in order to automate that with a drip sequence, or share really valuable content? I've seen some childcare centers do this really well now, where they'll create hyper local content in order to continue to engage their families that are in waitlist or have recently engaged in experience, and they'll share them content like the top 5 local parks or the top 5 family-friendly restaurants in the immediate area. That's incredible content because it's very likely that nobody's actually writing stuff like that. It doesn't take that long, especially if you know ChatGPT. It can pretty much find you a very nice article based on your search terms or your own input, and you can produce content really quickly now. But as a parent, who lives in a local area, it's like, okay, well, 5 things to do during this upcoming holiday break in the immediate area. Like, who's not going to click and read that? Then they're engaging with you and your brand. You're building trust. That stuff's really good. It's a little bit more effort, but it does go a long way. And it doesn't need to be every day, every week where you're communicating. If they're on the wait list, it could just be once a week or twice a month. As long as if you've got something to say, make sure it's important, make sure it's valuable, so that they continue to open up your email or your text messages, etc.
Really like that suggestion. I think that's a great way a statewide or a national brand to also involve their center-based staff. Here's some suggestions I got from ChatGPT. Now can you take a look and review, and are these real suggestions that you would actually give to a family that asked? It kind of takes the effort off of the center staff and the director, but still keeps them in the loop. So if a family comes in and asks about it or compliments it, they kind of know what's going on.
That's a really important point. It's like a lot of, especially marketing managers, they're trying to wear so many hats and do so much volume. They're like, oh, how can I do this local content? Like, I've got 30, 40 sentences. Well, you need to find other people to help you, right? We had this exact same scenario with social media. It's like, how do we get content from the centers, but still do the editing and branding and make it look really good? There are plenty of people in the service who are really good at TikTok or really good at taking film and photography, young female educators. They'd all like to make a little bit extra money, or even just have the opportunity to do another skill outside of looking after children. So there's a great opportunity to have sort of a designated social media manager within the center, or a designated content creator. There's plenty of people who would do it for an extra little bit of money, or just do it for the opportunity and the recognition. So, find that person in the center, designate that title, and give them the responsibility. They'll do a really good job. We have so many centers where we do their social media management, and we create a WhatsApp group. And all we ask is the center to share anytime you have something good in the center, pop it into WhatsApp. You have the fire truck come, take some photos or video, send it to us via WhatsApp. We'll pull that content, we'll edit it, we'll make it look really good, and we'll post it on your behalf with the content. For an owner-operator, they never touched it, but yet they've got a great content online. They just had somebody in the service sharing it, and they had an external team like Helppli editing the content and posting. So, this is where process and systems become super important, but, it's really not that hard to be able to create great content. You just have to trust your team.
Creating those brand ambassadors, or, whatever you call the people I like content creator too. I think that's definitely kind of a popular term, and I think there's a lot of young people that would love to break into that kind of area with their career. So I feel like there'd probably be, if an organization were to open that up as like an application process, they'd probably get a lot of interested candidates from their center.
I just feel lucky that I didn't grow up 10 years later. You have to be good looking, you have to be good at dancing, you have to be good at film and photography, editing, and be witty in your captions.
Yeah.
It's so much work, but they're all very good at it.
Yeah.
It's also a good resource for you to tap into.
Well, we talked a little bit about unique offerings that drive interest, and you mentioned some of the kind of baby and me, partnering with local businesses. Some other ones that we see often are like that date night care, the flexible drop-in, or different kinds of family events. Are there any additional kind of events or programs that you've seen move the needle for people?
I think it's just important to think outside the box. It all comes back to the one thing. You're trying to get people into the center to experience something. The more you think outside the box, the better it becomes. Like date night was a real hit, but also acknowledging the market that we're in. Flexible care options are very important. If you're not full, it may be a wise choice. If you're full, probably don't offer it. But I'm seeing this trend where it's like, especially now times are tough, People are really holding on to their money closely. They're probably working from home. I personally know many families that have children and they're looking after the child at home, but they're both working full time remotely. As a childcare centre, you've just lost another 10-15% of the potential occupancy because they're just trying to save money. You know, they're waiting it out, so to speak, until interest rates come down or there's clarity in the market. And so in times like that, just providing a little bit of a flexibility for those sort of families and trying to engage them in different ways is a good option.
Some of the marketing automation functionality within LineLeader that we really like to recommend to people are drip campaigns to kind of send those behavior-based communications that really engage with them at kind of right moment, right time. I imagine there's probably a few different ways that you are recommending your clients use those today. Can you share a little bit about how they're automating or, nurturing families throughout the funnel?
Yeah, I literally had this conversation yesterday, and we were exploring the exact same. What is the right way to sort of set up? It was a 7-place service, and they were doing everything right. They had the drip sequence. They were talking about the unique selling points, but they were throwing it in at the very beginning as soon as that family came in as a new lead. And the feedback from families were, okay, well, we're getting all of these business rules from LineLeader, scheduling a tour, like reminders and things like that. Plus, we're getting these unique selling points. It was overwhelming for a lot of families. And so it was like, okay, well, we mean well, but, they're already getting contacted with a phone call. They're getting reminder emails, text messages. Like, it becomes a bombardment and actually scares people away. So where do we want to position that? Well, we've now moved the drip sequence into if you move into a wait list, or you move into a lost opportunity. So, give your enrollments team a chance to, just be human, I would say. Have that conversation. People are very wary of being sold to, especially when it comes to their children. They don't like it. An organic approach is best. Okay, this is our service. This is who we are. We'd love you to come in for a tour. Just be genuine up front. Then if you get to that point where they're just not ready to make a decision, or we want to continue to re-engage them, whether it's your blog post that you're sending out once a month, or it's you're utilizing LineLeader to have a drip sequence. So for this particular group, it worked out perfect because they already had the drip campaign. They just repositioned to where it triggers, and the feedback was that it's a much smoother process now. Up front, it's all about getting that tour booked and that human interaction. For the families that aren't ready to make a decision, or end up dropping off or ghosting, we all know about that. Then they're just they're getting the unique selling points in the drip sequence from there.
Nice. Yeah, we see a lot of success with people using it for those kind of lost opportunities or to re-engage families, and again, just kind of be top of mind for them.
Yeah. I'll just finish with in a highly competitive environment where it's gains of 1%. Not ignoring your lost opportunity and re-engaging them. Although it seems like a lot of effort with drip sequences and campaigns, you can often recover 4 to 5%. Making sure that you have really good positive Google reviews. It's a bit of effort, but again, if you've got the best reviews in the local area, you're gaining an extra 1 or 2%. You do all these things, they add up. I've seen a service with a ratio of 2.0 run the Baby You Me programs, have the best reviews, the nurture sequence, do the monthly EDMs, etc. They've maxed out and they've got up to like 90%, even though I thought max occupancy is probably 80. So those 1% gains really add up. So it's important to not dismiss them, and if you've got the resources and time, try and implement them.
Well, there's so many different areas where an operator could kind of spend their time and put their marketing dollars today. Looking at organic search, paid search, maybe even paid social. Where do you kind of feel that an operator should start? And I'm sure it varies, but what's kind of like a best practice of where to start, which channel to begin with, especially for budget conscious operators. I think every industry is seeing cuts to marketing right now.
Yeah.
But especially in childcare, we've seen that among a lot of our clients as they're kind of trying to recoup some costs.
Yeah, fortunately, I've had a lot of time around a lot of data and had a lot of money to spend and choose where it goes. So I can tell you that probably between 45 to 55% of all of your leads are going to come directly from Google. So that you need to have your always on, and you need to be running Google ads. Look, you can approach Google ads in a few different ways. You can be definitely going directly for sales ready through search terms. But if you're in a more competitive environment, you can run like Performance Max, where you just generate more traffic to your website. You can start to utilize YouTube and display ads for retargeting and remarketing. That's where we see most of the conversions come from, and it does make a little bit of sense, right? Like, people need care. It's not like it's not a luxury item. It's like it's a necessity, and so they're going to be searching for it, and you want to be there when they're searching. The next best is Facebook, and Instagram. This is local communities. This is where they come to share ideas. And so it's a really good place to be. You do have to get your creative right, your messaging right, maybe run upper funnel campaigns. But I would say anywhere between 25 to 30% or 35% of your leads will come through there. In fact, when things are really dry on the search side, your Facebook can actually be sort of your rescue club. It'll really be a great way to generate leads in the upper funnel. If you ever run an open house day, you'll get 95% of your leads come through Meta. So there's 75%. So it only leaves a little bit more to come through referral, word of mouth, signage, skins. So you really need to think about, if you're spending your marketing dollars, where are you going to spend it? You're going to spend it in an initiative where you might get a 5-10% of that, which is often quite expensive anyway. I see this one all the time, and I cringe so hard. Well, two of them. One is doctors' offices on the TV. Great for the doctor, not so good for your childcare. They're expensive and they don't work. The second one is like mail postage. I don't know any millennial that's ever checked a letterbox. I have one. I don't know where the key is for it. Everything's digital. So, anytime I hear the word, can you organize a mailbox drop, I just cringe. I've literally run a campaign to 45,000 houses with a QR code and had 2 scans. Let's just say the return on investment was really bad. So, where are you going to spend your money? Let's be real. Digital is where it's at. Google, Facebook. If I took that 15,000 that I spent on the postage campaign and put it in Google, I could have got 150 leads. Big difference. So yeah, Google, Facebook, and then making sure that you're, somewhat in the local community. Sometimes you can, especially about open days or free public events, you can put in hanging banners within the community. The council might have a designated space for that. That's good. You've got local car traffic, seeing your signage or seeing your event. That sort of stuff is like, it's a small investment, and you're probably going to get a lot of eyes on the brand. I would do that.
Well, kind of last question here for you about the benchmark report. So the report showed that a lot of, again, parents of young children today, which are primarily kind of millennial and Gen Z families, are expecting very quick and highly personalized responses. They want to feel like it's coming from an actual person at the center. How do you recommend centers with multiple locations meet those expectations without adding more to their staff's plate?
Yeah, I mean, this is just where you have to have the centralized depository for your leads, something like a LineLeader. Let's not call something like a LineLeader. It is LineLeader. There's no software that's comparable in the market, to be able to have full marketing functionality. You can have that personalization. You can have at first name in your text messages, at first name in your emails. You can easily personalize your responses. LineLeader, and knowing when a call's coming in, especially if it's the second touch point and they're already in your CRM. It's hi Rebecca, thanks for calling back in, and you already know the next step, and it's a much more personalized experience, which ultimately you build rapport, you build trust, you get more enrollments. And using LineLeader to do that is a no-brainer. It is a minimal investment where you're guaranteed to get the returns. So if you're on the fence about using LineLeader, I can tell you from first-hand experience that you don't think twice. You have to be using LineLeader to manage your leads, because you just can't afford to have the wastage, and you need to improve your conversions. It's that simple.
Well, thank you. I agree, but it's great to hear that from people, out in the field every day.
No, I mean, I'm genuinely saying this. Like, long before we were ever in touch, and in the very early days, I tried many softwares utilizing spreadsheets or even, sales pipelines like Pipedrive, and just trying to come up with the right system to manage it. Just having LineLeader just be able to customize that pipeline and build out your business rules and sales funnels and complete the entire customer journey. There isn't a comparable product in the market. It does not exist, first and foremost. And to be able to have that reporting, especially as a marketing manager or someone reporting to a board or other investors, you want to be able to pull reports that show you exactly how you're performing. And it's incredible. Even the big guys are not reporting on the right data. They're not looking at churn. They're not looking at lead conversion or tour conversion. It's absolutely insane. Like, our industry is way behind from that point of view. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it, and you have to have this tool in order to actually know what's happening in your business. And as soon as you get those numbers in a dashboard, multiple centers, you can run a traffic light system, and it's very instant. Okay, well, it's not a lead generation issue. It's not a conversion issue. We're not retaining families.
Yeah.
We'll go and ask the families why that is. And quite often it will come back to cleanliness of the service, or, educators are disengaged, or the resourcing's not there. Those are really fixable things. Your data will tell you that.
Yeah. Would you say that that's, kind of understanding the funnel is the most important area where you think that operators could be using data to drive decisions, or are there other areas you think they should be leveraging data as well?
I mean, to me, having that centralized dashboard with those key numbers tells you the full story, or at least where to look. I mean, when we consult with big groups, we basically spend all our time just building the dashboard. With 40 centers, having all the numbers in a traffic light system, it tells you a very clear story. Like I just mentioned, if you've got everything lighting up green, except you've got a high churn rate, there's a hole in your bucket, your occupancy is not going up, and you now know where to look. Then it's just a matter of going, well, let's answer the question, why is there churn? Well, the best person to ask is the ones that just left your center, and they'll tell you what happened. They'll tell you why they left, and quite quickly you can take that data and you can start to make actionable improvements. Also, having that data allows you to identify issues way before they snowball, and you have a 30-40% drop off. I've seen that happen many, many times over and over again. An issue snowballs and it's never dealt with effectively, and all of a sudden management's like, oh my god, we've lost 30% of the center. It's going to take years to recover. You've got reputation damage just because we went across the numbers. If we'd seen a 5% drop early on, it would have rang pretty big alarm bells, and then we could have taken actionable steps to fix it. And quite often, it's if they can see that your families are seeing that they're being heard and those things are fixed, they go from being skeptical to promoters. They'll actually help you grow. So yeah, having that data is the most important, and I would get that right before engaging anyone in marketing.
So, as we look ahead to kind of the rest of the year, what trends or shifts do you foresee happening in childcare marketing or enrollment, or are there any trends or shifts that you might be excited about?
Yeah, look, I think it's actually a switch to just going back to basics. I think, we're sort of in a bit of a trough. There's a lot of uncertainty in the market. Occupancy is a little bit harder to get. It's easy to get educators now than it was a couple of years ago. People have tried throwing money at the issue and, trying to market their way out of it, but realizing that, it actually didn't get the results that they were hoping for. And so I do see a shift in going back to basics. Yes, we must have a good always on campaign. And make sure we're in the key channels and we're running additional initiatives and things like that, but not being crazy about it and just spending, insane amounts of money. It's actually redirecting some of those funds into improving the operation, and making sure that you have the right tools and systems in place, making sure that, the center is presented well, sandblasted the concrete to the entrance, you've got the flower beds, things presented well, like just going back to basics. If the operation's good, again, your service will naturally fill because parents will talk and promote. And look, parents never want to take responsibility for picking a bad service, and so they'll always reach out for referrals and recommendations. I see a big shift going back to just basics and running a really good service, training their educators, investing in their team. making a great place to work, making a great place to come for their children. And ultimately, they'll start to see growth anyway, and then they'll start to add fuel on the fire with more marketing. People are wanting to spend less time on those initiatives, and so they're setting up more automations. We see online tour bookings increasing rapidly. 5 years ago, I was always on the fence about it. I always had lead forms because I wanted my enrollments team to have those conversations because I felt like they would convert better. But now it's shifted. People, especially millennials, are just so used to online bookings. They don't really want to talk to somebody. Using the LineLeader online booking tool has made it a lot easier. But treating those as if they were a brand new lead and not booked in a tour is the most important thing. So you see that come into LineLeader, they've booked a tour, great. But let's also have that human contact. Let's also make sure we're using business automation rules and making sure that the center director is reaching out before the tour the day before to tell them that they're excited to see them. Is there anything that they really want to know about the center so they can prepare accordingly? Let them know where to park and how to get there. Utilizing LineLeader and setting up those tasks and reminders and business rules just automates that whole process. And so owners and operators can start to get out of the day-to-day grind and actually go back to basics and spend more time with just making happy families, and not making happy families, but looking after families, making them happy, and same with their educators and service.
I think that's great. Well, what kind of operators or centers are really the best fit for Helppli's services?
Yeah, great. I mean, we have anywhere between 1 to 20 services. We're best built for small to medium businesses, and that's because we have a hybrid model with a team in Australia, the US, and we have an office in Sri Lanka as well. So we're able to offer really competitive pricing and a service that is actually tailored to the childcare industry. I mean, when we started Helppli and got our pricing for the service, we actually reverse engineered it. So we looked at the revenue that a childcare centre would make. We looked at how much that they would spend on marketing and how much that they could afford to be spending on management. We looked at how much most are actually spending with agency, and we saw that we could offer the same service, actually a better service to be honest, for about 40 to 50% less with our model. That allowed childcare centres to get the management fee in a healthier manner, like in a fee that they're comfortable in paying, instead of like something where we'll give it 6 months, we know we really can't afford this, and we will drop off. Ours is sustainable. They can just add it as a part of their P&L and away they go. Instantly, they get a better return on investment because they've saved money on the management fee. They can direct those funds directly into running a campaign or improving the service. And so just by switching to us, they're automatically going to get a better return on investment. But they're also going to get our expertise, having worked with many, many centers over many, many years. Our strategies, we're going to help them skip all of the guessing and go straight to the stuff that works. I'm not saying it's going to absolutely work. We need to look at many factors, such as are there enough children, such as is the service quality there, are we the best value in the local area? Those sort of things, the reputation of the centre. If we can overcome all that, marketing will work, and we'll help all our centres grow. We've got a 90% retention rate. People stay with us for a reason, and I think I like to think it's a partnership. Before we take you on, it's sort of a qualification. We know that you have plenty of upside, and we're going to help you get there, and then we're going to help you grow to second, third, fourth, fifth, however many services you want to grow to. We'll be there to support.
Amazing. Yeah, one thing I love about Helppli is it's, you aren't maybe per se just like a digital ads agency that's kind of spinning up the same digital ads for everyone. You're really doing those tailor custom fit solutions and almost acting as a strategic partner. I mean, and helping them choose the right locations to expand in, and kind of even improving their curbside appeal and the services themselves. I think that's really makes you a great value add for any operator that's maybe feeling a little bit stretched thin and kind of like they don't necessarily know. They maybe need that set of outside eyes to come in and really kind of advise them.
Yeah, and I'll finish with like most agencies, it's we'll run your Google and Facebook ads. Well, that's all good and well, but if your entire brain is not speaking the same language, it actually feels quite disjointed. So you really need your third-party websites to be matching the look and feel of your website. You need your website to be ranking well from an SEO point of view. You need your Google and Facebook ads to match your social media or organics. And so we actually provide a service that's an all-inclusive. So you basically have a full marketing team as if you were a big provider, except you're just tapping into our team. So, every onboarding starts with an SEO audit, starts with a website audit. We'll share that with the clients and go, this is what we want to improve on. This is how you're going to rank on Google. We'll go and implement that on behalf of the client. We'll also obviously work on their Google and Facebook. If they add on social media, then we'll also do the same there. And it's so painless for providers because it's like, well, I don't have to now choose between, do I upgrade, my SEO or invest in digital ads? You can have it both. So that's where we're positioned. And agencies, it's good to find someone that's good at one niche. I think most agencies are actually starting to do that now. We have two. We have sports background, so I have a lot of clients that are in sport. And then we also have a lot in the childcare space. So better to partner with somebody that knows what they're doing versus an agency that's just guessing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, where can our listeners go to learn more or connect with you and your team?
Yep. So we're pretty much an open book. Like, you can visit helppli.com, and it's HEPPLI. I think we've got the logo up here. Helppli. And you can visit our website and get in touch there. Otherwise, you can just reach me through LinkedIn. I mean, I'm a real human. You can see my experience in the childcare industry via my LinkedIn, and reach out through there. I'm always very active in LinkedIn, so you can message me and have just a general chat. We're trying to provide a genuine service. There's no marketing tricks, and I think that's why we've had so much success.
Well, I really appreciate your time today, and I'm going to put your information in show notes for the description below for anyone who's interested in reaching out. But thank you so much. This was really, really informative. I feel like I learned a lot, and I love all the data and the numbers that you bring and the kind of strategic mindset that you bring to the industry.